Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. The end of summer is approaching, and just before the winter flight plan starts, I would like to use this opportunity to show you one more classical holiday airport with a challenging approach, and that is going to be Mykonos. The airport of Mykonos is located on the same name island in Greece, and it is located on a small plateau with the very narrow and short runway featuring only 1,900 meters with a width of 30 meters. Let's have a look into the general overview on our approach charts. And this is what the airport looks like. We have a caution here, wind shear with winds north and west and northeast winds. And it happens that just today our wind is coming directly from the north at 18 knots, so some wind shear can be expected on the approach. Mykonos Airport is located inside Class Delta and Class Echo airspace until flight level 100, which means that VFR traffic can be expected, and the air traffic control on the approach does not have a radar available. The only instrument approaches available are all for runway 34 due to high terrain on the north of runway 16, which means that for runway 16 only a circling and a visual approach is available. Due to all these limitations, Mykonos Airport is classified as captain's takeoff and landing only. So the first officer is not allowed to conduct operations at Mykonos. Let's talk about a couple of the threats that we will be facing on this approach. Flocks of birds are often reported at the airport, leading to the threat of bird strikes on final approach. Loss of control in flight due to the turbulence and winds on the approach is a possible issue. And of course another threat is controlled flight into terrain due to the rising terrain next to the runway, which can lead to turbulence and downdrafts. In my airline, approaches to runway 16 are not permitted when conditions do by any means allow landing on runway 34, which means that runway 34 is definitely the preferred landing runway. If, however, an approach to runway 16 is planned, then only right-hand visual approaches are approved. The minimum visibility is 5 kilometers with a minimum cloud ceiling of 2,500 feet. Be aware that there are additional limitations due to the narrow width of the runway in place, at least in my company, which, depending on the runway surface conditions, are either 23 knots for takeoff and landing if the runway is dry, and for landing on a wet runway it is 23 knots as well, but for takeoff only 15 knots. In terms of operational restrictions, Mykonos is restricted to captains only takeoff and landing, cannot be used as an alternate airfield, and a full flap landing is mandatory when the steady wind reported by the tower is less than 20 knots. Now today we're flying the Airbus A320 where this is not so much a problem, but if we were flying the Boeing 737, then in gusty conditions we would normally favor flap 30 over flap 40. However, due to the short runway of only 1,900 meters, it is definitely preferred to use flaps 40 unless the flight conditions make it necessary to do otherwise. Let's quickly talk about the approach that we have planned today. Our planned approach is the RNAV approach for runway 34 via the waypoint Letzo. So from Letzo, a minimum of flight level 80 and maximum 250 knots. That is what we have in the magic box over here. Let's quickly review it in the flight plan. 250 knots, minimum flight level 80, as we can see. We'll proceed to Mike Kilo 522 at a maximum of 230 knots. So that's Mike Kilo 522, maximum 230 knots. From there on, we'll proceed to Mike Kilo 510, maximum 210 knots, as we have in here, and that one is above 2,000 feet. And then to the final approach fixed Mike Kilo 508, which is mandatory at 2,000 feet. So we have 508 at 2,000 feet. We do have a 3-degree glide path, which is in the FMC as we can see over here, and we're going down to a minimum of 1,180 feet, which, since it is an LNAV only minima, I've corrected to 1,220 feet. For the missed approach, we're going straight ahead via some RNAV waypoints here, 592, 4, 6, and then to a Mike Kilo November VOR. And in the FMC we have 592, 4, 6, and Mike Kilo November, climbing 3,500 feet, and that is what our chart says as well. One more consideration for this approach is that due to the chance for optical illusion on final approach, it is very much recommended that we keep the autopilot in until the minimum use height, because the path calculated by the autopilot is going to be more correct than what pilots could easily fall a victim to, since the runway is just 30 meters wide, providing the illusion that you might be higher than you actually are. And the same goes for the rising terrain just in front of the runway, which can further substitute this illusion. Therefore, use of the autopilot is very much recommended. So we can slowly see our wind gusts starting to pick up due to the wind blowing over the terrain over here, and that is going to make our approach a little bit more interesting here. On the final approach, I am probably going to get a couple of more Ryanair comments from you guys, but especially on a runway like this, it is important that you don't flare the plane too much, but just put it on that ground and get the airplane stopped. Approaching the base leg, I start reducing my airspeed already. 230 is the maximum at waypoint 522 anyway, but it can't hurt to be a little bit slower. In the end, ICAO standard speed on base leg is 180 knots, and even though I don't plan to slow down that much yet, I do plan to fly around the green dot speed over here. In the meantime, we can run the approach checklist. Briefing confirmed, ecam status checked, seatbelts on, barrel ref 1019 set, minimums 1220 set, entry mode selector normal. That's the approach checklist complete. Right, let's go flap 1. Speed is showing a general trend to increase here. I'm going to aid a little bit with some speed brakes. And we can arm the approach mode. Change it to autopilot 1 as well. As the first officer has been the pilot flying on the leg going here. Now the captain is taking over for landing and the takeoff, and then the first officer will do the landing back at our home base. Okay, speed brake is stowed. Final approach mode is active, so missed approach altitude 3,500 feet can come in. Now there's our runway. Fairly narrow and located right on a plateau. At this point, we probably have our landing clearance already. Cabin crew, please take your seats for landing. Terrain noted. Okay, flaps 2. Gear down. We're passing the FAF 2,000 feet, no flags. Flaps 3. Flaps full, landing checklist. Cabin crew advised, auto thrust, speed, auto brake, medium, and ecam memo, landing no blue. Landing checklist complete. Now comes the moment where it starts to get really difficult to judge our correct height.
100 above.
Checked.
Minimum.
Continue. I'll keep the autopilot in for now as the airplane is guiding us down. And here comes the turbulence. The wind is coming right over that rising terrain over there. And here comes the puppy into view. Right, that's the moment I'm going to disconnect. Now fly it manually onto the puppy. Flight direct, I can go off. Alright, on the puppies. Three reds again.
$100, 50, 40, 30, 20, restart.
Okay, that was a bit stronger than I expected, but that is exactly what I meant when I talked about the optical illusion. So we have 100 knots, 80 knots, 60 knots.
Meine Tavern-Treppe bleiben Sie noch so lange angeschnallt sitzen, bis wir unsere endgültige Parkposition erreicht haben.
Manual brakes.
Über ihn ausgeschaltet.
So, a perfect example here of how the optical illusion can come to play. You could see how, due to the narrow width of the runway, I flared rather late, and that combined with the fact that the Phoenix takes a tiny longer moment to start the flare than I would actually expect, we could see how this resulted in a positive landing. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this video and would appreciate to see you again on a future one. Until then, thank you very much for joining, and if you do want to support the channel, you can do so through the Buy Me a Coffee link below.